Okay, well, looking at this second video on the human resource management, we're actually going to look at the department. But we'll begin first of all by considering the development of HRM. And over the last decade, many HR departments have developed a strategic role within their organisations, and line managers have started to play a more substantive role in the people management activities. I think the time and the effort involved in developing effective relationships with your HR department and working in cooperation with them can actually produce significantly benefits. And some of these might actually be perhaps a better understanding of the links between recruitment, people management, reward, etc., and their impact on the business. These support and help in recruiting, retraining, managing and developing your team. I think it provides an early warning of potential people or organisational problems which could otherwise cause disruption and involve unexpected costs. I think it could provide a guide to legislation relating to employment issues. It can certainly provide a much more effective service, as the HR staff will be much better to be able to gauge and meet the needs, and leading on to that, a more efficient service, especially in terms of accuracy and timeliness. For you, it can actually provide a sounding board for your ideas and your plans, and of course support for your own personal development. If we looked at some definitions, I think it could be said that in most organisations, people are the biggest single item of cost, the biggest source of value, and the biggest source of risk. And understanding the links between people management and business performance provides valuable business intelligence, and in a growing number of organisations, the HR function and the rest of the business work together to develop these. In large organisations, there could be a number of HR departments serving different business populations, including both specialists, things like recruitment, compensation and training, and generalist HR professionals at different levels of seniority and experience. But in smaller organisations, there's less likely to have this level of experience. And in fact, in small organisations, smaller companies, HR may well be carried out by a manager with additional responsibilities. And perhaps there's a growing trend towards outsourcing of HR functions. So we're going to be looking at different items, assuming that there's a dedicated in-house HR function. But actually these can be identified and changed, adapted for different situations. If we were to consider the span of the Human Resource Management Department, you could say it's a transaction processor. It's the classic nuts and bolts service. It can also be the technical expert in employment and management, providing that best practice. It could be the employee advocate, helping you to take into account the employee perspective of things, and a strategic partner, an integral part of and a contributor to the management team. And we're just going to look at each of these areas in a bit more detail. If we were to think about the transaction processor, HR transaction processes and functions could include things like ensuring that employee policies and procedures are kept up to date and legally compliant and correctly implemented. The administering and managing recruitment, perhaps the receiving, sifting applications, arranging interviews and other assessment processes, preparing contracts, checking references and ensuring legality of the employment relationship. Perhaps in administering changes to terms and conditions and managing employee benefits, keeping records and employee information in perhaps both paper and electronic formats, and tracking absences, both holidays and sickness, developing and running induction and training events, and managing the processes through which people leave the organisation. And in some companies, it's about running the payroll. If we think of human resource management as technical experts, and their expertise would include things like employment law, individual behaviour, performance management, compensation, employment relations, organisational behaviour, resourcing and training and development. And I think that it's really important that HR departments are treated in the same way as you would treat other experts or consultants. And I think sometimes it's tempting to think that managing and employing people is just common sense. And in many ways it is. But acting reasonably is the core of all management and employment good practice. Employee expectations are rising, and management techniques are becoming more sophisticated. Employment law is now very much a specialised discipline, and mistakes made can be expensive for a company, and individual managers may have to bear some personal liability for their actions. If we think of human resource management department as an employee advocate, has advocate functions which could include things like acting as a release valve, a conduit of information up and down the organisation, an early warning system for organisational problems, a management conscious, an objective facilitator helping to resolve disciplinary or grievance situations, a negotiator, sometimes in conflict situations or in relations with trade unions, and perhaps as a mediator. It's much more than a welfare role, and HR people should have the exposure and credibility with both employees and managers to play an effective part in maintaining good employee relations. And this can mean that they are in a difficult situation, representing on one hand the views of employees to management, and on the other hand the views of management to employees. And to walk this tightrope successfully, they obviously have to gain the trust of both the employees and the managers. If we think of HR as a strategic partner, and this may actually include acting as part of your management team, providing a people management framework and strategy to support the business plan, providing a people perspective for business planning activities, and providing a people perspective for management decision making, acting as a driver for cultural change, and facilitating organisation and team development, driving the development of people to ensure robust succession management strategies, acting as a management coach and mentor, and acting as devil's advocate. And these are activities which could never really be outsourced, as they are so key to the success of the business. The phrase strategic partner perhaps seems like a management buzzword, but it does convey both the level and the manner in which HR should operate in order to give you value for money. And with all forms of management, we've discussed the basis of control and to actually make sure things does provide value. So measurement of human resource management is really important. And perhaps examples of this could include things like human capital accounting. It's been a preoccupation in recent years and may become a requirement of company accounts in the future. Putting numbers on the cost of employing people is actually quite easy, but it's actually far more difficult to put numbers on the value of people. However, your people are likely to be one of your most expensive assets, so it's worth looking for ways of measuring the value you gain from them. And some elements which you may wish to consider are the cost, pay, benefits, including social charges, expenses, occupational costs, IT equipment and system costs, training, labour turnover, absenteeism, employee litigation, and value, company performance, perhaps in sales profits, as a factor of the total employment costs, improvement in company performance as a factor of training or system costs. I think with people there are some key performance indicators, and they actually be compared with the previous year results, budgets or targets, or local industry benchmarks, and they could include things like training and development days and costs, not just formal costs, but all the days spent on development activities, labour turnover or employee retention, the reasons for people leaving, the numbers of vacancies filled internally, and the time taken to recruit replacements. And this may be an indicator of your HR's functions efficiency, or it may be a measure of your company's attractiveness as an employer. Sickness, absenteeism, both in the short and long term. Incidents of formal disciplinary or grievance cases. Responses to employee attitude services. Performance appraisal ratings and number of performance appraisals held. Employee contribution to suggestion schemes and process innovation programs. Responses to customer satisfaction surveys, and the impacts of workforce optimization on sales growth. Labour turnover correlating with sales, and leadership performance as a predictor of growth or return on capital employed. I think there's a warning if we're looking at HRM departments, and something managers should do, or they should avoid doing, is trying to duplicate the activities or second guess the advice of the HR personnel, the people who are clearly experts in this field. And managers also need to look at avoid accepting without question procedural requirements which are perhaps overly rigid or bureaucratic, or which may interfere with the achievements of your business goals.